Welcome to the debut episode of the DDT Archives here on the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network. My name is the Maverick, Greg Lotta. With me, as always, is my brother-in-arms, my tag team partner, the courageous one, Mr. Courageous, Christopher Lotta. How you doing today, brother?
What's going on, world? How is everyone doing? It is awesome to be on the Tapped Out Podcast Network.
Absolutely. And just to give you a little background on who we are and where we come from, we used to have a little podcast called High Spots and Low Blows. Then this opportunity came along to be on the Tapped Out Network. So we want to first off thank Nick and Myron for allowing us and bringing us on board to join the team. We couldn't be more excited. But here we are. We are brothers. We are lifelong wrestling fans, and we are here to take it to the throwback. We are going to break down old pay-per-views. We'll do WWE, WWF, WCW, ECW. We will do list shows. We will do comparison shows, and our mission statement for real is to remember what it was like when you were younger, to remember how you felt as a young fan, and relive all those great moments and relive all those memories and make everybody remember why we are here and why we are wrestling fans. Am I right?
You are correct. The passion that we developed in the parents' basement, watching old school wrestling from all hours of the evening to talking about Nitro and Raw. Our love for wrestling runs deep, and we cannot wait to share it with the world.
Absolutely, and that's what we're here to bring you today on this maiden voyage of the DDT Archives. And we're going to start off where it all began. We figured when we were trying to figure out who or what we were going to talk about for our first episode on the network, there was only one option for real for both of us, and that was, let's do Wrestlemania 1, the granddaddy of them all, the first one from March 31st, 1985. And we're going to break down that whole card, go match for match, share our thoughts, share our memories. And we're also, what we like to do on this show a lot of the times is to bring it to the now, and we kind of compare and contrast and bring some of the discussions from early wrestling into today's arguments. And that's what makes it exciting for us to do this kind of format. So, anything you want to touch on before we get started, bro, or are we good to go?
Let's start this for real. This is not Wrestlemania 1. It is Wrestlemania.
Well, I wanted to give our fans and some of our new listeners and our old listeners a frame of reference, okay? Nowadays, after there's been 33 of these things, if you just say WrestleMania, they're going to think, well, which one? Well, it's the one.
Wait, there have been 33 since? Where have I been?
There have been 32
didn't
since.
That guy took off his hat and left his jacket. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
All right. Don't be an asshole. We still live in the now, okay? Just stop it. All right. So, a little background on the WrestleMania show. It took place at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, our home arena. We have seen countless shows in that venue, and it's the greatest place in the world. I don't care what you say. They could put WrestleManias in the football arenas and have 80,000 people there, but Madison Square Garden, and it seats 20,000, and it's loud and it's amazing, and it's the best place to see everything. What are your thoughts on that building before we get into the card itself?
It is by far my favorite arena to watch wrestling live. We have nothing but solid memories. We've seen WrestleMania 20 there. We've seen house shows there. We've seen Raws there. We've seen SmackDowns there. We saw Hulk Hogan as Mr. America. We've seen just about everything that can happen at the Garden.
Absolutely. And like that, and I'll tell you what, that building is so special to all of us, especially us as, fans of other sports, especially the New York Rangers and stuff like that. and how that place can get rocking. And it's no different than at this show at WrestleMania. You can see the crowd was into it from the jump, and they had no idea. It wasn't like now where you know what kind of to expect coming out of a WrestleMania. Back then, nobody knew what this was. It was just kind of the super card, because the WWF had to compete at some point with Jim Crockett Promotions, they started Starrcade in 1983, and Vince McMahon wanted to create this ultimate wrestling / entertainment experience. And this is why you got all these celebrities involved on this show, which we'll get to as we go down the card. And when you're trying to draw eyes onto your product, you get two of the most popular people that are in America at this time, and that's Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper. And as we move forward, it's that's where the build to this event started. There was two events on MTV. There was the Brawl to End It All, which took place in July of '84, and the War to Settle the Score, which took place a month before in February of '85. So this is that whole rock and wrestling era going on and the height of Hulkamania. And we were young then. We were 4 or 5 years old at this time. So what memories, if any, do you have of this real rock and roll wrestling Hulkamania era as early as it was in '85?
The rock and wrestling cartoons to start.
Absolutely.
For sure.
That show kicked ass.
I absolutely loved that as a kid. I'm not going to say I remember the day of the event because my parents didn't take me to watch it on closed circuit TV, but I sure know that I rented that VHS tape and wore it out consistently. Whether it was at my grandmother's house, whether it was at my parents, it was just straight up, I want to watch WrestleMania over and over and over again. So while it may not have been in 1985, it sure was one of my earliest wrestling memories.
Yeah, and for sure. And you mentioned it before, and that, like, how archaic does it sound now, where you had to go to the video store to pick up a VHS cassette tape of this and rent it, when we watch this show right now and it's at the touch of a button. You just got to log on to the network and go on it. And if you haven't seen this WrestleMania in a while, or you want to revisit it and follow along with us, please go on the WWE network, watch the show. For WrestleMania standards, it's not long. It's only about 2 hours and 15 minutes. But, think about how difficult it was to watch it back then. Unless you were in the building, you had to watch it on closed circuit TV. And just to give an example of what that meant, like, you had to go to, like, a movie theater where they were showing it and pay to see it. Or, for instance, these poor fans in Pittsburgh, they paid to go see it where the Penguins play at the Igloo. And the feed crashed, and so the whole city of Pittsburgh got the show for free on ABC television like a couple of days later. Is that insane or what?
That is absolutely crazy.
So just think about that. Like, all these people, they had to leave their homes to watch a WrestleMania, when all of us nowadays can just turn on our computers, our phones, our tablets, and our televisions and watch it for $10. It's crazy to think how far we've come in 32 years. Sold out crowd, Madison Square Garden. They had 19,121 people there. Although they kept saying 25,000, which I guess they were hiding people in the bathroom and in the parking lot, or maybe they were talking about the crew. I don't know. Madison Square Garden could never hold that many people.
Yeah, they like to embellish for sure, but that's okay. When you have something that unique and that incredible, might as well just lie about attendance. Who cares? Yeah,
who cares? Exactly. I'll get to the embellishments a little later in the second match on the card, but because it's actually pretty funny. But we'll get to them in a minute. Obviously on the call is two of the all-time greats of the announcers, like the voices of our childhood. It's Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse the Body Ventura. You had Mean Gene Okerlund backstage doing interviews and stuff, and Lord Alfred Hayes, which we'll also touch on a little bit more. He was doing some sideline reporting from the entrance, but we'll get to that. So, first off, it starts out with Mean Gene singing the national anthem. So, and I remember you texted me this when you were watching it, and apparently they did have some famous singer, which they never named, lined up to be there and sing the anthem, but they no-showed. So they had to fill in with Mean Gene Okerlund. He didn't do a bad job. He was all right. But what were you telling me via text message that you thought it was kind of weird they used him?
Bro, you have one of the greatest piano players of all time. Just have Liberace play the anthem. I mean, you have Mean Gene Okerlund in the middle of the national anthem. Yeah, I mean, you could have had Cyndi Lauper, but she was busy getting Wendy Richter ready.
Okay.
But you have Liberace come out and play, and then you don't have words put into the middle of the national anthem. I've never heard everybody in the middle of a national anthem before. I get what he was going for, but if there is one thing I am a traditionalist about, it is the national anthem. So I did kind of have an issue with it. Just me personally, it's one of my deals as a coach, as a former athlete. That is the most awesome part of any event and spectacle. So I think they did drop the ball a little bit. He didn't do a terrible job. Just, I thought they had better options there. And they let it slip.
Yeah. I mean, they could have gotten like John Amarante, famed singer who does the Ranger games. And would you have been upset since they like to yell in the middle somewhere, "Let's go Rangers"? Because that's the coolest part of the anthem during Ranger games.
As long as there's a Pot Van Sucks in there, I'm good with it.
All right. 30 years later, Ranger fans still haven't let that one go. All right. So here we go. We're going to get started. Wrestlemania. From March 31st, 1985, the first match on the card, the first match in WrestleMania history, is Tito Santana defeating the Executioner, the Masked Executioner, by submission. Just under 5 minutes, he beat him with the figure 4 leg lock. And how'd you feel about this match? I thought it was a good pace match. I thought the ropes looked like super loose compared to nowadays, but maybe that's just me. But how'd you feel about this curtain jerker?
So, you need to understand that the Executioner for that night was Playboy Buddy Rose.
Correct.
Who's a fantastic worker over time, and it was a really solid opening contest. Tito Santana in his prime, dude, he was really good. Put on great matches. What I did think was interesting, using Greg the Hammer Valentine's finishing move to win the match. Clearly setting the stage for a figure 4 versus figure 4 kind of deal coming down the line when he took on Greg Valentine later on in the feud.
Yeah, they had a great feud for the Intercontinental Championship, and it would rear its head a little bit later on in the night. But, Tito Santana, he's a Hall of Famer for a reason. He was great. Could move in the ring. I remember seeing interviews with him where he felt that this match was a little bit beneath him against the masked guy. But when Vince McMahon came to him and said, we need to get this crowd going, and you're the guy to do it, that's a huge responsibility. And I've always said this as a wrestling fan. I think the opening match is as important, if not more important. Main events get the butts in the seats. Opening matches that are good keeps them there. And when you have a match that can open up, that can keep the crowd engaged because it's already on fire and keep them going, and it sets the tone for the rest of the night. We've said that time and time again, right?
Absolutely. And what a great way to kick it off with two solid workers. Obviously, Buddy Rose under a hood. It could take away a little bit in some people's eyes, but to be honest with you, I think it's a great opportunity to really put the focal point on Tito Santana.
Man, absolutely. Good point. Really good point there. Then after this match, we have they start doing the backstage segments with Lord Alfred Hayes. They have him in this awkward spot where he's right by the entrance ramp, but he seems to be in the way of everybody. And he looks so uncomfortable from his face to his suit. He really looked like, this poor guy looked like there was somebody standing off camera with like a gun pointed at him. He looked so nervous. And people are walking in front of him, walking behind him, bumping into him. It's this huge arena. They couldn't find anywhere else to put him. It's so terrible. Like, how did you feel about these places for Lord Alfred Hayes?
So, before we go into the where in the world is Lord Alfred Hayes, let's start with who is Lord Alfred Hayes. He played such an integral role of my early WWF fandom.
Absolutely.
All-American Wrestling with Lord Alfred Hayes was just classic. His British accent, sort of, kind of, just, for whatever reason, I was always drawn to his behind-the-scenes segments, all of his introductions. I just, for some reason, really took to him. And I do find it very ironic that you have the British guy doing All-American Wrestling.
I mean, for me, Lord Alfred Hayes, he'll always be the voice for me. As growing up in New York, as we did, when WWF was on MSG Network, he was the announcer. And he was kind of like the voice of those shows for a lot. And a lot of those are on the network, too. But, I mean, he always, like, you always think of, these two things kind of go hand in hand. It's Lord Alfred Hayes, WWF, Madison Square Garden. He belongs there in some capacity. But, yeah, I just felt so bad for him on this night. He just looked like he just wanted to be anywhere else but there. And he was in such a weird spot.
I enjoyed it, though. He just seemed like he was always the butt of the jokes, and that's cool with me.
Yeah, the only other problem I have with it is that they would go to him first. You would see the guys walk by him out into the ring, and then they'd throw it to Mean Gene, and he'd be interviewing the guys you just saw walk past him. So the sequencing of when they would throw segments to him was all off. It was really bizarre.
There were a lot of backstage segments at WrestleMania.
It was in between every match. Every match they had something.
I know. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that's how you feel. It's how they hyped you for the matches, man. So the second match of the night is it came out to be, after all said and done, the 7th shortest match in WrestleMania history after 33 WrestleManias. And that's King Kong Bundy, who was managed by Jimmy Hart at the time. He defeated S.D. Jones in... The official time was 24 seconds, but on the broadcast, they said it was 9 seconds. So this is your basic squash match. King Kong Bundy was a monster. He would go on to be a part of the main event the next year at WrestleMania 2 when he faced Hulk Hogan in a cage match. And, you know, the problem I had with this is them keep telling you it was 9 seconds when it clearly wasn't, was that I can handle them embellishing attendance numbers. You can't really quantify those. I can handle the embellishment of weights and heights when it comes to guys. Your fans at home, we don't care about a scale or a measuring tape. But you got to think that your fans can count and tell time. And to say this ended in 9 seconds is just, it's a little insulting as an adult fan. Like, how did you feel about that?
So here's my biggest issue with the concept of 9 seconds. He got a pin of 5. So that means King Kong Bundy went across the ring, knocked down S.D. Jones, pinned him in 4 seconds. 4 seconds.
Oh, man.
I don't know about you, but I can't do a whole lot of things in 4 seconds. And my wife is very thankful for it.
All right. Hashtag yuck. Jesus. All right. On that note, can we move on, please?
No, let's talk about the greatness that was King Kong Bundy. In all
what a
seriousness.
sweet man he was.
Is. He's still with us, pal.
Oh, he is. I know. I didn't mean it like that, but you know what I meant. I know he's alive, but
I'm sure if you go to a local ECPW show, he'll be on the main event.
Yeah, and he's
Good
always
old King Kong Bundy might. You gonna start cutting me off every time I talk?
No, sorry.
King Kong Bundy might be one of the, if not greatest, heavy-set wrestlers of all time. Just, he had the look, the intimidation factor, and he could work. He wasn't the greatest high flyer. I mean, you're not going to compare him to Bam Bam Bigelow, but for what he did, dude, he was so good and believable as anything else. And to me, that was what made him a great foil to whoever he was going against, whether it was Hogan in WrestleMania 2 or Hillbilly Jim and his little friends in WrestleMania 3. I mean, Bundy was the epitome of bad guy and that the main part of the Heenan family.
Yeah, he was great, and I get why they did this squash match. They're trying to build him up to be a monster. Obviously, it would lead to bigger and better things for him. But yeah, King Kong Bundy was awesome and such, like you said, believable. He could pose a threat for anybody on the card. Like it's hard when you have a guy like a Hulk Hogan who is larger than life, completely unbeatable, but then you have somebody who's physically imposing as King Kong Bundy was. He made Hogan look like he could get beat, which was a hard thing to do, which was probably the hardest thing to do at that time for WWF, is to find viable opponents for Hulk Hogan, physically intimidating opponents for Hulk Hogan. You know, when you had a guy like Piper who was the verbally and mentally a challenge for Hogan, but not quite physically, you know, these guys really kind of fit the bill. Him and King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, stuff like that. So absolutely, totally agree with you on all those fronts. So after that match, we got a backstage interview segment with Ricky Steamboat and Matt Bourne for their upcoming match. The one thing I did find ridiculous about this particular segment was the fact that Bourne was yelling into the camera, looking dead into the camera, threatening Ricky Steamboat, and Steamboat walks from 2 feet from the side off camera to do his interview like 2 seconds later. And it's like, who are you yelling at? He was right there.
Yeah, well, Matt Bourne was another guy that was just a solid worker. And, you know, being the maniac Matt Bourne, he came off like he lived his gimmick. And to me, that's a huge part of being that heel. Now, I want to know if you caught what they referred to Ricky Steamboat as.
I didn't.
It was not the Dragon. He was
that I knew. I could. They didn't call him the Dragon. You're right. Yeah. What did they call him?
The Lion.
Huh.
Yeah. I did not remember that as a kid, but I would like to point out how big Ricky Steamboat was.
Dude, I had that in my notes.
He was huge.
He was yoked. He was enormous in this match. That's the biggest I think I've ever, and I've watched a lot of Steamboat matches over the years, but that by far, that's the biggest I'd ever seen him. Right? It's got to be.
Yeah, he must have been down by an Exxon station or something. Allegedly.
Allegedly. Man, you're right. He was enormous in that match, and he would defeat Matt Bourne in just over 4.5 minutes with the high cross body off the top rope for the pin. You know, the thing about this match, I like this match. It was fine. The thing I didn't like about it is I felt they could have gone longer, and as soon as it was starting to get good and I was starting to get into it, it was done.
It's 1985 though. You got to remember, it's 1985. Yeah. You didn't have the network where you could have 30-minute matches for every match. And I wish, in a lot of cases, that they would kind of go back to maybe somewhere in the middle would probably be perfect. Yeah. Like a nice 8 to 9 minute match.
That's what I'm going at. I didn't need a half hour or 40-minute match here. Like, I just wanted something a little bit longer, and especially with the next match on the card that went as long as it did, and that was pretty crappy. They could have given a little bit more time to Steamboat and Bourne. I think we would have gotten a little bit more out of them. That's why this match didn't make my best match of the night, just because it just fell a little flat in the timing.
Let me ask you a question, though. Is part of that because you look back in retrospect and know how good Ricky Steamboat is? If you had watched that in 1985, would you have honestly been like, they needed to give him 7 or 8 more minutes?
No, no, and I'll tell you why. Because as I was watching it, and I try and watch this and suspend my knowledge of these guys a little bit and just watch it purely as a fan. The reason why I felt this way is because as I'm looking at it and the match ends so abruptly, I was like, man, this was just getting good. And it had nothing to do with the combatants. You know what I mean? It was just the match. The match itself, as I was watching it, I was like, damn, that was a little too quick. And it was just starting to get good and just starting to get into it. That's how I felt about that.
I don't disagree with you. I think it was starting to tell a story. And the beginning of the match didn't really feel like it was telling a story so much as it was just a match. And as the story started to go, the match ended. And that's where I had an issue with the timing of it, because I thought they could have told a good story. But it's an undercard of your first major event like that. I guess I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, and obviously these guys aren't who they would become. You know, Ricky Steamboat wasn't Ricky Steamboat then.
I disagree with you, though. Coming in from Mid-South, he absolutely was.
He was a big name, but he wasn't. He wasn't the megastar that he was. He was a good guy, and he was a name and a star, but he wasn't who he was 2 years later, 5 years later.
I'm not saying he was, but I agree with that. But he definitely was a guy. He wasn't Corporal Kirshner.
Well, I know that. That's not what I'm saying.
Just making sure. Yeah, sometimes you scare me a little bit.
No, I try.
I gotta look out for you, brother.
Whatever. Love you too, man. So Matt Bourne, he was the most famous of the Doink the Clowns, right?
He's the most prominent Doink the Clown. I think you could argue that Steve Kern might be the bigger wrestling name attached to it. But when I think of Doink, I think of Matt Bourne.
Yeah, me too. All right, I just wanted to touch on that, ask you that follow-up question before we move on. So the next match of the night was, in my opinion, probably not the best match. This is the one that went, as we talked about, the Steamboat Bourne match may have went too short. This one went way too long. And that was David Sammartino with his father, Bruno, Hall of Famer, all-time great, and Brutus, the fucking Barber Beefcake, managed by Johnny Valiant. They go to a double DQ at just under 12 minutes. And I want to get your take on this match first before I go on, because this match is pretty crappy. The ending was fun, but I mean, this match bored me to tears. What about you?
Okay, so I'm gonna have an unpopular opinion right now, because I thought Brutus Beefcake was at his absolute best in this match.
Why would that be an unpopular opinion?
Because everybody hates Brutus the fucking Barber, and I actually really enjoyed Brutus Beefcake at that point.
Well, he hadn't graduated from barber school yet.
I agree. But Brutus Beefcake, well, first off, have you ever seen a wrestler that has a normal gimmick be announced as from parts unknown? Because Brutus Beefcake was announced from parts unknown.
Why?
I don't know. It was weird to me. It was almost like somebody gave him the wrong card. But going back to David Sammartino sucks. right? It didn't matter who he wrestled. He could have wrestled Macho Man, and the match would have sucked. I actually forgot how truly athletic and gifted Brutus was before his accident.
Yeah.
Like, if you looked at the way he worked, he was a solid worker at this time. I mean, he took a backdrop at one point, and I kind of went, whoa, I forgot, genuinely forgot that he was an athletic big guy.
I mean, I think he also gets a raw deal because his gimmick as a barber was so cheesy. But yeah, he carried this match so well. And
it was
really
the least of his cheesy gimmicks, by the way. The Disciple was pretty bad, and so was the Booty Man, and Brother Brudeye, and name the next one. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yes, no, yes, no, no, yes, yes, no. Sorry, I just had to.
You're fine. But, I mean, like, throughout this whole match, you're in... Look, Bruno Sammartino made his name in Madison Square Garden in the early days. That was his building. And this whole time, you're just waiting for him to, like... And it finally happens at the end of the match when him and Valiant get involved, and that's when the disqualifications happen. But... I mean, you're waiting the whole time for him to get involved, and it really saved that mess of a match. The problem I had with it is like one of the worst spots in the melee is that Bruno kicks Valiant right in the gut, and Valiant, like, and I'm no big city wrestler. I've never wrestled in my life. I don't know. I'm not trained. But, you know, with the eye test, when you kick somebody in the gut, I would assume that your head wouldn't fly back in pain. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would agree. But do not sell your wrestling accomplishment short. That showcase show when you were the announcer, that was still one of the best, worst shows of all time.
Hey, my one night only as a ring announcer. We'll talk about that one day, I guess.
It would have been so much better if you had closed your fly. I can't believe you did the whole show with your fly open.
Well, whatever. I wanted to give him a good show. Anyway, the other thing I noticed about this match was the fact that nowadays the rings are designed and the areas around the rings are designed for them to do goofy shit around the ring. What was there, like an inch and a half in between? There's so much crap around the ring, and the fans felt on top of everything, and there was no room to do anything. There was stuff going on outside the ring, and there was just like you couldn't do anything. Did you notice that?
It was a little cramped for space, but I think when you're trying to get 25,000 into a building that holds 19 and change, I mean, sometimes you got to be up close and personal.
Maybe that.
But
there's
we
like
go
an
back
extra
to how
40
much
people
David
just around the
Sammartino
ring.
sucks. Because he really was the worst. Like, capital shits in the shits. And that one's
Hashtag
for you,
the
legend.
shits.
Hashtag the
Yeah,
shits.
hashtag the shits. That's what he was in this night. And would this be our low? Would this be your low blow of the evening as the worst match of the night?
No, it's not. Because I thought Brutus carried it well.
Okay. All right. Had to ask. It wasn't mine either.
It might be an honorable mention. But
it's
there were
by
a
far
couple, there are a
it's
couple
by far
of
the honorable
shits.
mention.
Yeah, there were a couple
fine.
of the
There's
shits.
a couple of. I got you. There's a couple of honorable mentions. All right. Next up on the card, we have the Intercontinental Championship match featuring Junkyard Dog. He would beat Greg the Hammer Valentine, who at the time was the Intercontinental Champion, by a countout, just under 7 minutes. So obviously Valentine would retain the championship. Valentine had pinned JYD, but had his foot on the ropes. And the match was called, and then Tito Santana, who couldn't seem to mind his own damn business, came out to argue the decision. The ref, for some reason, reversed it, which I'd never seen before, that somebody that was not involved in the match at all came back to argue the decision, and they restart the match. Obviously, Valentine has a problem with that. He just leaves. He gets counted out. So talk to me about this match. I didn't think it was a terrible match. It was okay. But God, was that Intercontinental Championship awful looking?
It was so bad it was good. I would love to have that hanging on my wall. I won't lie. Just because
Kelly Green Intercontinental Championship.
Oh yeah, it would be awesome on the wall. Robin would hate me, but it would look really good, like right there.
I'd wear it on St. Patrick's Day.
Would you wear it Ric Flair style?
Yeah. Is there any other way?
Just as long as you got a robe, buddy. You got to wear a robe.
I gotta find a robe.
So, a couple of things stuck out to this match for me. I loved JYD as a kid because his character was awesome, but he was not a very good worker. He was able to get the crowd behind him and charismatic and, like, loved his character, still loved his character, but his work rate was slightly above piss poor. It doesn't stand the test of time at all.
Yeah, he was one of the few guys on this night that had an actual entrance. Like, he had music and he came out and people recognized it and they got on their feet. A lot of these guys would just walk out there, you know what I mean?
Grab them cakes, man. Grab them cakes.
Man, and that's the other thing about this show, too, is they showed a lot of slow-motion replays, and it exposed a lot of stuff, especially during when Valentine pins JYD with his foot on the ropes to end the match at the beginning, I guess. And the ref went down so early. Like, they're not even on the mat, and he has already got his hand up to count. It's pretty... I understand you got to get in position, but... it was pretty quick. And I don't want to talk about too many inside things. It's not my style. But it's just some little details that you notice watching this stuff and going back and looking at it. These replays exposed a lot of bad things, wouldn't you say?
How thankful are they that HD television doesn't come out for another 25 years?
For real. And they have the multiple cameras that they can hide stuff like... they got that. It wasn't that long after this where you get the Bret Hart and Lex Luger both feet touching, and they had a camera just right, so you really couldn't tell on TV whose foot touched first or if they both touched at the same time. They got creative over the years in their production, but this is pretty lousy.
You know what?
Any other thoughts on this match?
You know what drove me nuts about the cameras? That random shot that went all the way to the back of the arena. During every match, just for a second. I didn't understand. Like, it was like, we just want you to know what it was like to be poor at WrestleMania.
Yeah. No, for sure. All right. Next up on the mat, on this match is, or on this card rather, is it's the Tag Team Championship match, and it would show the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov being managed by classy Freddie Blassie. They would defeat the U.S. Express of a very young Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda just under 7 minutes, and they would beat them for the WWF Tag Team Championships. Captain Lou Albano made an appearance. He was managing Windham and Rotunda at the time. And you texted me while you were watching this match about how baby-like Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda looked.
Yeah, they were young, but... oh, man. You just saw the talent ooze off those two. They are so good. And I regret not naming Mike Rotunda one of the most underrated superstars of all time. Because he was really, really good as a youngster.
Yeah, they were. And talk about, like, this... I know we see it nowadays, and... you have the Jinder Mahal as the number one contender, and you have like these foreign heels, Rusev, and things like that. But they don't carry as much weight as it did back in the 80s. You know, you're at the height of the Cold War right now still, with Reagan and Gorbachev fingers on the buttons at any time. And the Iron Sheik is coming out cutting like just vicious heel promos in front of a New York crowd. And...
yeah.
You have you have Nikolai Volkov, the Russian guy. And not to mention, we're still about 8 months away from Rocky Balboa ending the Cold War with his speech after his match from Ivan Drago. So, I mean, I was really into this match, and it's such a classic heel versus babyface match. But the one takeaway I had from it was I love how these marks nowadays go off, and I'll call them out on it. How they bitch about John Cena or they bitch about Roman Reigns, and they hold up signs that say Royal Rumbles and stuff. If Cena wins or Roman wins, we riot. And I'm watching this match, and I'm just thinking to myself, you know what? That's adorable. It's really cute that you think that you might actually riot. We won't. When these guys won, they were actual I was shocked they got out of the arena alive. Am I right?
The vitriol that was felt for those guys was unreal. But let's pause for a minute, because there's some really cool stuff that we could talk about with the U.S. Express. So let's start with the fact that what has become synonymous with Hulk Hogan, "I am a real American," was written for the U.S. Express. It was originally meant for them. Their other entrance song might be one of the greatest songs of all time, "Born in the USA." And if I am not mistaken, it was what they walked out to at WrestleMania. However, I don't believe the WWE currently owns the rights, and therefore they edited it out with other music. Not 100% on it, but I know they used to come to the ring, at least at live events, with "Born in the USA."
Okay. Yeah, they edited it out on the network for sure.
Because you heard the crowd get quieter too. So that's why I'm thinking they edited it out. And I know they've done that to other people's entrances on the network because of not having the rights. But just white bread baby faces with just, we are the U.S. tag team. We are the young up-and-coming team. And just such a good match. Iron Sheik is just as good as he is crazy. And once again, I absolutely hate Nikolai Volkov. He sucks. He's the worst wrestler of all time.
Is that because he yelled at you?
He was a dick to me, bro. It wasn't even he yelled at me. He was a dick. He thought I was some wrestler, and he just was fucking with me. And I turned to him, and I was like, dude, I'm not even a worker. I'm this guy's brother. And he went,
gotta let that go, man.
Never gonna let that go. By the way, Nikolai Volkov is not tall in 2000. And, I guess that was like 2008. He was not tall at that point.
All right. So they would win when the Sheik hit Barry Windham with Freddie Blassie's cane, and Volkov would pin him. The crowd went nuts, as I said to before. This was my favorite match of the night. What about you?
Actually, I agree with that 100%. I loved this match. It told a good story. It had a nice little schmaz finish so that you could justify stealing the belts off the champs. It was awesome. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right on. Right on. So, any other final thoughts on this tag team title match from WrestleMania 1?
Just real solid work. Solid work. It's old school wrestling at its best.
Yeah, definitely check this one out. If you check out any of the matches from this card, that one is definitely a hidden gem that when you talk about WrestleMania lore, this match doesn't come up. Especially from WrestleMania 1. Everyone talks about Hogan and Mr. T and Piper, and everyone talks about the women's match, and everyone talks about Liberace and Muhammad Ali and all the great things that happened. This match kind of got lost in the mix, and from rewatching the show from front to back, this was definitely the standout match of the night for me. After that, we would have Andre the Giant defeat Big John Studd, who was managed at the time by Bobby the Brain Heenan, in a $15,000 body slam challenge match. It would go just under 6 minutes when Giant slammed Big John Studd. Oh man, was Bobby Heenan's suit on point on this night? Am I right?
It was, but so were the $1 bills in that gym bag.
that he took off with. Yeah, they bring out a duffel bag with the WWF logo on it that apparently contained 15 grand. And Andre's throwing him into the crowd. And, geez, he was so popular at the time. Unbelievable how popular Andre the Giant was. And I think it was a great opponent matchup for him, too, because not a lot of guys at the time could, like, stand up with Andre. But Big John Studd was big enough to where it looked like, maybe he's got a shot, right?
Big John Studd might be one of the more underrated big men of all time. You don't really hear him get a whole lot of love, but he was solid. He wasn't great. He was definitely overshadowed by Andre, but he was good, and he definitely was the one guy that could be a foil to Andre. And he'll eventually start tag teaming with King Kong Bundy in main events around the country against Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant.
No. I mean, Big John Studd, for his credit, he's a Hall of Famer. And I know that
so is Coco Beware, so let's be careful about throwing around Hall of Famers.
And if you had let me finish, I would have said that. I know that doesn't mean much for a lot of these guys, but he at least has earned that respect where he wasn't, and that was before it was really a popularity contest. He got in the early times where they were throwing a lot of these older guys in, but he's there. Does he belong there? I don't know. I'm not one to say that, but he at least has earned that enough respect where you talk about the late great Big John Studd, that he is a Hall of Famer. But the other Hall of Famer that I wanted to ask you about is Bobby the Brain Heenan. In your opinion, is he the greatest manager of all time?
Second greatest.
Behind?
I think Jim Cornette might be number one. As much as I hate to say it, I think Cornette's one, Heenan's two. But I'm sure if you ask me again next week, I'll flip-flop it. They are 1A and 1B. They are just, he was so good. But Cornette was that Weasley guy that you just, with his obnoxious voice that you just wanted to punch in the face. Heenan at least, Heenan had that big city type feel to him. So you kind of went, all right, there's something likable about this guy that I hate. Cornette was just the obnoxious Southern guy that I couldn't stand.
Yeah, they were flip sides of the same coin. Cornette was the guy you loved to hate. Heenan was the guy you hated that you loved him so much because you knew he was bad, but you just couldn't help yourself sometimes. He was just so entertaining.
Well, I mean, in theory, they played the exact same character in different regions of the country. I mean, there are so many comparisons to Cornette and Heenan. They just had the New York feel versus the Southern feel. That's really the difference between the two of them.
No. All right. This leads to our next and final title match of the night, which is for the WWF Women's Championship. It would see Wendy Richter defeating Leilani Kai with Cyndi Lauper as your manager for Wendy Richter. It would be just over 6 minutes. And Leilani Kai was being represented by the fabulous Moolah. And now, is this your least favorite match of the night?
Yeah. I hate to admit it.
Why do you hate to admit it?
Because
you feel like you're picking on the women?
It has nothing to do with the fact that it's a women's match. I never really got into it. I like Cyndi Lauper. Obviously, as a kid, she was all over the television, and we may or may not have had some car rides where we sang along with Cyndi Lauper. Time after time.
I admit nothing.
You're a liar. You are a liar. We used to ride in your wooden station wagon singing Cyndi Lauper and Madonna. Don't lie.
We
had a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's talk about this for a second, because nowadays they do incorporate celebrities here and there in WrestleMania, and it doesn't always play. She was in a role as a manager. She had been around for a few months, actually for a while, leading up to this match. And I don't think for some of the younger fans nowadays, especially since the music industry now is so weird with iTunes and nobody buys albums anymore. I mean, she had the 11th most popular album of 1984. Cyndi Lauper was everywhere. And if anybody can say different, that Cyndi Lauper didn't have a hand in the success of WrestleMania and to bring eyes to that product, as well as Mr. T, but we'll talk about Mr. T when we talk about the main event, you're just lying. You're lying to yourself that you cannot give this woman her credit as popular as she was, and that her mainstream likability and popularity led to the success event. That was a huge gamble for the WWF. You've heard Vince McMahon say it, that if this failed, he was going to go bankrupt. So, I mean, the match itself wasn't great. I thought there was a lot of hair pulling. It felt like a little like a sideshow. The finish was weak with the roll-up. It just took forever, it seemed, that the roll-up happened after, with Richter rolling up Leilani Kai. But the crowd seemed to love it, and they were really into it. So, I mean, how do you feel about this as we talk about women's wrestling is so huge and it's such a big part of the discussion, especially on our network, where they talk about it after every Raw and every SmackDown, and it's a big part of the shows now. Where was women's wrestling at this time? Because it just seemed like it was kind of a freak show.
It was Moolah or it was nothing.
No.
In the WWF. So a couple of things stand out. Just, it didn't feel like there was much chemistry between Richter and Leilani Kai. And to me, that is what hurt the match. It wasn't that it was a women's match or anything like that. It was just, there was no chemistry. There was a story, because Cyndi Lauper's there to protect Wendy Richter from the Fabulous Moolah. How that actually happens, I don't know, because Cyndi Lauper wouldn't have had a shot. But at the end of the day with that match, it wasn't entertaining, and that was my issue with it. But I want to have a little quick side segment. Since we're talking about Cyndi Lauper, and we're probably never going to get an opportunity to talk cheesy 80s young pop stars again, I'm going to play Bang, Marry, Kill with you right now. Cyndi Lauper, Debbie Gibson, Tiffany. Go.
What? Marry, fuck, kill?
I was saying Bang, Marry, Kill because I am an educator, but yes, fuck, marry, kill.
Okay, sorry. We were under the explicit tab. I thought we were allowed to use the F word. My bad. All right. I would say kill Tiffany.
Even after the Playboy pictures?
Especially after the Playboy pictures. Okay. Marry Debbie Gibson. Cyndi Lauper.
And can you share your rationale with us as to why?
I always had a crush on Debbie Gibson when I was a little kid. Cyndi Lauper just seems crazy enough that it would be fun just to like do once. And Tiffany just annoyed me, and she has weird beady eyes.
Okay. Fair enough. Legend.
What about you?
We're calling you out, Legend. I want your answer to this question.
MFK.
Nick, Byron, you can play in. Everybody. Wrestling dorks, we're calling you out too. Cyndi Lauper, Debbie Gibson, Tiffany. So
MFK.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. Fuck Tiffany. Marry Debbie Gibson. And kill Cyndi Lauper, because if she talks, she would annoy me, man. Once she opens her mouth, it's the reverse of Viagra.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And who thought we would go to FMK on our first episode of DDT Archives?
I don't know, man. You threw me a curveball there, but I like it. I like where you're going with that. Good stuff right there. Way to think on the fly.
No problem, man.
All right.
That's why I'm the courageous one.
Absolutely. So
I asked the hard questions.
So that brings us to our main event of the evening, the first main event in the history of WrestleMania, which would see Hulk Hogan and Mr. T defeat Roddy Piper and the Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff in a tag team match, which just had a bunch of people involved and all this great stuff. And it's not a great match. The match took a little over 13 minutes, but there was a lot of standing around in the beginning. I would say the first 4 minutes, they really didn't do much. But obviously it's memorable with the inclusion of Mr. T in there. And Jimmy Superfly Snuka is there. Cowboy Bob Orton had a big factor in the finish. And all this stuff. Muhammad Ali was a special referee. Pat Patterson was the referee. You had Billy Martin as the guest ring announcer. You had Liberace as the timekeeper. All these pageantry of that's made WrestleMania great over the years. But the match itself, how did you feel about it?
All right. You're fast forwarding through some important stuff.
Okay.
I'm going to slow you down. I'm going to bring you back a little bit.
Okay.
Can we talk Billy Martin for a minute?
Yeah. Billy
Martin, as a Yankee fan, holds a very special place in our hearts.
Icon.
But he is a terrible ring announcer. Like,
he had no business being there. And to be fair, he was probably wasted.
He was hashtag the shits.
Less than 2 months later, he'd be back managing the Yankees for a reason.
He emphasized the Mr. and not the Wonderful. Like, it was just bad ring announcing.
Okay, question. Worst ring announcer, Billy Martin or me?
Billy Martin.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Oh, I've said nice things to you when I was drunk. Don't lie.
Like what? They're not going down right?
I've said that a few times. Dude,
whatever.
I missed out on a potential amazing college experience because I had to find you dumbass.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway.
You texted me, help, I'm lost. And I gave up on greatness.
All right, fine. Let's move forward,
That would have made me the legend. That would have made me the legend.
There's only
room.
I
had to find your absolute lost ass.
Yeah.
And now I'm just the courageous one who just stands up for his friends.
Appreciate that. There's only room for one legend on this network. I'm sorry, buddy. It's been taken. Anyway.
Well, I would have had it first because he's 8 years younger than us. And I guarantee you he wasn't having those experiences at 10.
All right. Fine. Let's talk about Mr. T for a second before we get into this match.
The A-Team.
The A-Team. Okay.
Clubber Lang. What do you want to go with? He was awesome. He was the 80s.
I want to put it in perspective for some younger fans nowadays because TV is a lot different than it was in the 80s. In the 80s, we had like 3 or 4 channels if we were lucky. And unless you had cable, there wasn't, and even cable didn't have a lot of like network programming, full-on TV shows. And when you talk about that and you talk about the A-Team and you talk about Mr. T, he was everywhere. The A-Team was like a top 10 show for a couple of years. And when you talk about ratings, 20% of households in America watch the A-Team. So look down your street. If you see 5 houses, one of them was watching the A-Team. It's crazy to think of nowadays because TV is so different. And Mr. T, whether it was his cartoon show, his delicious cereal, which was amazing, he was guest starring on everywhere. He was with Nancy Reagan doing the Just Say No stuff. This guy was everywhere. And I know a lot of the guys, and you read the stories about all the wrestlers hated him being there because he wasn't one of the boys, and he was disrespectful, and he acted like he was a star because he was a star. But WrestleMania 1 is not a success without the inclusion of Mr. T. Agree or disagree?
He is a pivotal piece to this success. Absolutely. Is he the main reason? I don't know if he was the reason, but he was
I didn't say
definitely
that,
a large part of it. He played a major role, without a doubt.
Yeah.
You know, Vince bet on the celebrity card being the difference, and it worked out for him.
Yeah, it paid.
It was a risky play. I mean, you're putting him in with one of the most temperamental stars of all time in Roddy Piper, who is absolutely one of my favorites, and I love Piper, but everybody knows anything you've ever heard of Piper, if he did not like you, you did not have any success with him. And putting him in with Mr. T, that was a risk. And they did it 2 years in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It was crazy. And that match was just as if you're looking for some sort of great technical wrestling match, you're not going to find it here. What you are going to find is that big fight feel, great crowd energy, the great entrances. You had Piper come in with that full bagpipe band, marching band coming down. You had Real American with Hulk Hogan, and they showed the famous WrestleMania video that you see every time of Hogan and Mr. T walking through the entranceway in the locker room. And it just had that big fight feel. Muhammad Ali was there, gave it that as well. And it just felt like at any point that match would explode. And one of the things that I noticed about this match too was, and one of those rare things, and it was to put over the celebrity talent, which you've known has been like the Vince McMahon way over time, is that Hogan had to make the hot tag. He didn't receive it. He was taking a pretty good beating at one point in the middle of this match, and he had to tag Mr. T in to rescue him. That's something you never saw. Yeah,
and part of me still hates that, but it was necessary for what it was. So, how do you rank this in WrestleMania main events in history? Is it towards the bottom or is it towards the top? Because I can make a legitimate argument for both.
All right, I would put it. And I know this might sound like a cop-out, but I think it's in the middle. I think there's a lot of... You can think back to a lot of bad WrestleMania main events. And I would place this somewhere in between from the middle to the back end of them. Just because when you run down WrestleMania main events, it's just there's a lot of one-on-one matches that were just better. It's not that this was bad. It's just not that this was bad. I thought it was fun. Actually, it was a lot, and I've watched this match before. Watching it again, I think I enjoyed it more than I have watching it in the past, if that makes any sense at all. But I think there's too much competition when you look at WrestleMania main events for this to be anywhere near the top.
All right, so here's where I'm going to disagree with you. I am going to go and say that, yes, work rate wise, if we were just going by the best work rate, it doesn't come into the discussion. But with the exception of Hogan Andre, there is no more meaningful main event in WWE history.
Well, you didn't ask me that.
I left it very open-ended, my man. I said, was it one of the best or one of the worst? And I never said work rate. I just said, was it one of the best or one of the worst main events?
Okay,
if
that's
you're going
fine.
Work rate, it's down the bottom.
And I'm going at that overall. That's why I put it in the middle. It's not. It's towards the middle, but you have 33 main events to work with here. It's just the competition was too stiff for it to be near the top.
But the
meaningful,
meaning
absolutely.
of this the meaning behind this match, if that match failed, we are not talking about watching the WWE Network. We may not even be talking about professional wrestling as we know it, if that main event does not go off the way it does.
The importance of it and the success of it is without question. Absolutely. But if you're just telling me you're ranking, I'm looking at all factors of what makes a great match. in storytelling, build, importance, star power, work rate, all of the above. Everything, all these criteria that we talk about when we break down matches or we look at matches nowadays, I would have to put it somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's towards the bottom because there's been a lot of dog shit WrestleMania main events over the years. But there's too many good ones. I could probably rattle off like 10 that were better than them, given time to look at it and rank them. But like, I mean, it's up there, and it was entertaining. It felt big, and you don't get that a lot nowadays. You don't get, it's so watered down. I mean, this show was 2 hours and 15 minutes. You had a 5.5, 6 hour show in April. I mean, how are you supposed to build stuff and have to get that big fight feel when you've been there all day?
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this. And again, if I'm going work rate, if I'm scaling that a 1 to 10, it's probably a 3 or a 4. But it just, because of what it was, to me, it's going to be in the top 10.
Okay.
Without a doubt for me. And maybe top 6 or 7. Now, the other thing that we talked about a week or so ago is who is more important to this match? Hogan or Piper? Who made who?
To this match or to
just
overall
in general
in their roles of their careers?
In that time frame. Forget what happens in WCW later.
Okay.
In this window of time, that 85 to 87 time period, or 84 to 87, who makes who? Does Piper make Hogan, or does Hogan make Piper?
I mean, it's the age-old argument, and I know a lot of our friends out there are fans of comic books, and we've talked about this in the past, how it's the same argument as like, is Batman without the Joker? Is the Joker without Batman? You can't have one without the other. So, I mean, at the time, and I'll always hark back to this point that a hero is as good as its greatest villain. And Roddy Piper was Hulk Hogan's greatest villain. And I got to go with that. Piper made Hogan, because you're not this Superman, Hulkamania, take your vitamins, say your prayers, without this just horrendously bad guy that would smash coconuts over people's heads and mess with your mind and all that stuff, because he posed such that great psychological threat with Hogan. It wasn't like the Warrior or anybody like that posed that physical threat to Hulk Hogan, as we mentioned earlier in the show. Piper had that psychological edge on Hulk Hogan, which is so important, especially in an entertainment field like wrestling, because you can't get by like the body differential. But if he messes with your mind, if he could psych him out. So I would say I would say that that Hulkamania became what it was because Piper pushed him to that level. But it works both ways.
Piper is the only foe during this time frame that Hogan does not pin clean. He's the only one. Look at the record books. That, to me, says everything about it. Hulkamania is not Hulkamania without Piper. I hear bagpipes and it gives me chills because of just how good Roddy Piper was. Man, just one of the greatest heels of all time. Like, he was the first cool heel because he was just such a dick. And it was great. It really was. And obviously, as a little kid, it was, I'm a real American all the way, Hulk Hogan must pose. But as a 36-year-old looking back and watching, man, Hulk Hogan would be nothing without Piper telling that story early on in his run.
Yeah.
Just, you're right, the psychological piece makes Piper just unique and incredible.
All right. One last follow-up question as it pertains to the event of WrestleMania of itself. Do you think that these footballs I'll preface this by saying that we've had the privilege of being a part of an arena WrestleMania and a football stadium WrestleMania. Cards aside, do you think the football stadium feel to WrestleMania hurts it and it loses kind of the hot crowds and the intimacy of a true wrestling show when they're having these major events in football stadiums?
The stadium show is cool because it's the only time we've never really had the fear of not getting tickets. But I love the arena feel to it. And you're never going to get it back because it's all about money. But
why would you? You're selling out. It's not going to go back until they stop selling tickets for it. You're right.
No, that's what I'm saying. They're never going. Why? It makes no sense to go backwards. But to me, the feel that you get inside of a jam-packed arena is unique. But the other piece to that is, and I know there are people that are going to strongly disagree with that, if you have a 3-hour WrestleMania and keep it to 3 hours, like it cuts off at 3 hours, you will have that same level of excitement in the crowd at an arena show. Remember, we were at one of the last ones that wasn't on the network. And that crowd was electric the whole time.
It was the last one that wasn't on the network.
Yes, that's true.
I forgot. We were at 29. 30 was the first one on the network. Yeah.
So once that stadium was electric, wasn't the same sound that you get inside an arena, but the crowd was as electric as anything. But once those shows started to go 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours,
I can handle 4. I think for an event like that is 4 hours, 3.5 to 4 hours is fine. It's a bigger show. You have to get everybody on the thing, on the card. That's fine with me. But when you're hitting 5 or 6 and you got pre-shows and you have all this nonsense going on, it's exhausting. And by the time you get to the end of the night, how are you supposed to have that same fire when you've been there all day?
Yeah, to me, that's the biggest drawback of the network is I think it is absolutely killing the bigger pay-per-views because it's dragging it out. I love wrestling. Mm-hmm. I can sit and watch old school wrestling forever, but here's the key. I can pause it and come back.
Yeah.
I don't want to pause WrestleMania and come back when I'm watching WrestleMania live. It's just not what I want to do. But when it's 6 or 7 hours, you are pushing me to my limit.
Yeah.
Not to mention ending it at midnight is just, I want to say borderline unacceptable. I mean, think about it. We loved it because of what we started doing when we were younger. I remember watching WrestleMania 6. With that said, I wouldn't have watched WrestleMania 33 if I was 12 years old because it ended way too late.
Absolutely. And I guess that's a good place to stop off here. So as we wrap this up, we put a bow on our first episode of the DDT Archives here at the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network. Any final thoughts on this first WrestleMania before we start going on to some future shows and what we're going to be doing?
I just thought Wait, there is one thing I'd like to point out. Why'd you skip the Corporal Kirshner match?
There was no Corporal Kirshner match.
You're a liar.
I'm not.
Corporal Kirshner
What are you talking about?
Or was I watching WrestleMania 2 after 1? I watched
Maybe
WrestleMania 2. yeah, that's what I did. I watched WrestleMania 2.
Stop calling me a liar.
How did I forget that? You know what it was? I watched them literally back to back. I was like, how did you forget Corporal Kirshner? And then I realized he fought Nikolai Volkov. So yeah, no, that's my bad. We'll have to do that show sometime.
All right, all is forgiven. We will get there eventually. So just a few quick notes as we move forward with this new show. We will be Mr. Courageous and myself, the Maverick. We will be in Baltimore on June the 4th for the Bruce Pritchard, Conrad Thompson Something to Wrestle With live at Jimmy's Seafood in downtown Baltimore. So if you guys are going to be out for the show, if you're going to be new fans, seek us out. We'll be there Saturday night. We're not doing much, maybe recording a podcast, but that's about it. But we'll be around. So if you guys want to hang out with us and meet us, we'd love to meet some of our listeners. Which brings me to our next point. Since we will be in Baltimore, we've had a poll up on on our Twitter page for the last couple of days, and I'd like to give the results of that. Since we will be in Baltimore, and that is the home of WCW's Great American Bash for as far as we can remember, we put up a poll the other day, a few days ago, about which show of the Great American Bash we would cover when we are in Baltimore. So, would you like to hear the results, sir?
Well, I'm looking at the results because I can access Twitter.
All right, so the three choices we had were the first one that was held in Baltimore that was on pay-per-view, which was 1988. We also put on there the last one, which was in 2000 with WCW. That would be the last one that was on pay-per-view before WCW would fold, or if we would we would cover both. And the voting was really close, absolutely close. And in last place was the last one from 2000 at 21%. In second place was both with 32%, but with the majority vote of 47%, we had the first one in 1988. As much as we love our fans, they really don't dictate what we do on here. I just was kind of curious putting the feelers out there. So we're going to do both anyway because we're going to do what we want on the show. Am I right?
I am definitely about doing what makes Mr. Courageous feel good.
Yeah, so we do want to cover kind of like two completely different eras of WCW. So since we're going to be together in Baltimore, we're going to kind of do a double header, and that'll be in a couple weeks though. As far as next week, you're just going to have to stay tuned to see what we're going to pull out next time on the DDT Archives. Let's get our plugs out of the way. You can follow the show on Twitter at DDT Archives. You can follow Mr. Courageous at
the Courageous _1.
Absolutely. We're still, you can find us on the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast website. That's tappedOutWrestling.com. You can follow them on Twitter, Nick and Myron at Tapped Out Pod. You can listen to their shows. Let's plug all their shows. They do their live call-in show with The Legend after Raw and SmackDown. Also on the network, we have the Wrestling Dorks with the Gorilla Press, and they just put out half-hour quick hitter shows. They're doing a bracket special in the midst of their shows of the greatest storylines of all time. So definitely check out John and Sam over there at the Gorilla Press, and they're at Wrestling Dorks. And that's about it. You can watch all. Have you downloaded the Fight app yet?
Yes, I did.
Oh, it's a really great little rabbit hole of wrestling. If you want to check out some good things, download the Fight app. You can catch our friends of the network over at Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling, and you can get all the Ring of Honor. If you don't get Ring of Honor in your town, you can watch all the TV shows on there. It's really great stuff. Absolutely. Until next time, the Courageous One. Thank you. This was a fantastic first offering from the DDT Archives. We can't wait to grow and show you more and really delve into the throwback of professional wrestling. As we sign off, it's the Maverick saying goodbye.